Hello, thank you for joining us once again, Mayor Provenzano. This is the third installment, I
Yeah.
guess, of questions and answers around COVID-19 and the city's response and sort of the general context that's happening here. Um, Thank you, I guess, again for joining us. We really appreciate this, and I think by the number of questions that we get, the people who are out there are certainly appreciating this as well.
Well, I appreciate you doing this with me, Mike, and to the whole team at Village, and Derek for helping us with the editing. It's important to speak to people and for people to have a chance to ask me questions, and I wouldn't have that opportunity to the same degree if your team wasn't working with us here. So I really appreciate that.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. Well, we'll get right underway. We've got a number of questions here. I think what we maybe would get right into is there's a number of people asking about sort of the numbers that they're hearing locally. I think there's a couple of different parts to this, but in the questions that we got yesterday, people are thinking that the numbers that we have are low. The number of reported cases that we have in Algoma are low. And I think the follow-up question to that from a couple of people was, does that mean maybe we're going to get through this sooner, or are we going to see restrictions lifted specifically in Algoma or Sault Ste. Marie sooner? Do you have any sense of that?
Yeah, I can share my perspective on that, and I want to be clear. This is my perspective, and I don't speak for Algoma Public Health. So I just speak for myself. And I spent a lot of time considering this, and I spent a lot of time looking at other communities and other regions, and considering the numbers of positives being identified in other places. And I track what's happening across the country and in the province specifically. So my feeling on Algoma specifically, and I think that's the heart of the first question, is we are doing pretty well. We're tracking, the positives that we're identifying, and we're identifying at a lower percentage than a number of other communities and regions. And we don't seem to have the caseload here that many of the communities that we compare to have. So I think those are positives. But I really want to be careful to recognize that there's a lot of unknown here. So testing really isn't as comprehensive as it probably should be. So we probably don't have an entirely accurate picture of the caseload in Algoma. I expect that we're going to get more positives over the coming term as they ramp up testing. And I expect we will see more positives in Algoma and in the city of Sault Ste. Marie. So although I think we're doing well, and I think we could attribute a lot of that personally to how well the community's taken up the message of self-isolating when you are supposed to, and otherwise staying home and only going out when necessary. And I want to commend a lot of people who have been following those guidelines. This isn't time to spike a football, right? So we haven't scored a touchdown here. We're still playing defense. I think we're playing solid defense here in Sault Ste. Marie, but we got to keep it up. We got to keep doing what we're doing. We have to keep following Algoma Public Health's advice, and that advice is very clear. If you are coming in from out of country, you have to self-isolate. If you have COVID-19 symptoms, you have to self-isolate. And if you don't, we still want you to stay home. When you do go out, we need you to practice physical distancing. So I think to the second question, if we all stay committed for the next few weeks to these same principles, I think we'll start to see our way out. And I would personally like to see, the provincial and federal government start talking about what that looks like, start talking about the path out. I recognize we're not there, but I think it'd be good to give people a sense of what that's going to look like in the transition from this stage, which is really a full shutdown stage, with the exception of essential services, to an interim stage. We're not going to get out and just be back to normal. It's not going to go from where we are now to where we were 3 months ago. It's going to go from where we are now, I believe, to an interim stage. Where we stage, who is permitted to be out and about and who isn't, and what businesses are permitted to be open and what aren't. And I think we'll transition from where we are now to back to normal through a stage process. And I think it would be helpful if we were to start talking about that in a few weeks' time. But in the meantime, what we need to do is we need to stay committed to the advice Algoma Public Health and our public health experts are giving us, and we need to stay home.
So this isn't the time to be complacent about it or to think that this cases. Yeah.
No, I'm told by Algoma Public Health we haven't seen evidence of community spread here, but there could well be community spread. We just haven't identified it yet. And although our numbers, are respectable, and I think there's something to be happy about there and positive about there, that they're not higher. We can't take that for granted, and we can't have a sense of complacency. We can't think, well, you know what, maybe it's not here to the same degree. It's here, and it travels very quickly, and they're still learning about this virus. They're still learning about its contagion levels. They're still learning about the range of disease that people suffer. People suffer very mild symptoms to really aggressive symptoms. So you might have some people that have had it that really haven't thought much about it or called it in or reported it. So we don't have them recorded as a probable, and they haven't taken a test, so there's no positive there, but they've had it. And they, if they're out and about, they can pass it on. So, and I understand and am glad people are thinking towards the future, and people are looking at these numbers saying, hey, maybe we're doing pretty good. That might well be the case. My message is this isn't the time or place to celebrate a win. It might be the time and place to respect some good work and to express appreciation to each other for committing to some of these principles. But we have to stay committed, and we have to stay committed for a period here. The provincial government's declared this emergency through May. So we're going to be committed through May. And I think I'm hoping that in a few weeks' time, we'll have some good conversations about what the exit strategy on this looks like.
You spoke about people passing this virus on. We did get a question from someone who's asking about people that are traveling in and out of Sault Ste. Marie, apparently for work. I don't really know personally what the scenario would be there, but we've had a few questions of people, from people who are asking about workers who are maybe coming to Sault Ste. Marie and returning to Southern Ontario on a regular basis for their days off, and what we can do to stop that. Is, number one, is that something that's happening that you know of? And number two, is it something we can control or prevent?
Yeah. So I've had people email me about it. So I've had people email me about people they were aware might have a job, let's say in Western Canada, in Alberta, for instance, and are returning home to Sault Ste. Marie on their days off. Look, the one of the things we have to recognize and understand is that the quarantine order that the federal government put out, which binds people, which is a lawful order, relates to people traveling into Canada from outside of Canada. So the quarantine doesn't apply to Canadians moving around the country. And there's no provincial order that prohibits a Saulite or somebody who's from Toronto moving between those communities. So if you live in Sault Ste. Marie and you work in Toronto and you're an essential service worker and you went down there to work and you came home, or vice versa, there's no provincial order that I'm aware of that prohibits someone from doing that. Now, we're seeing some provincial orders starting to come out that are prohibiting people from working in two institutions. So you're seeing that they don't want people working in two nursing homes. So if you worked in a nursing home in Sault Ste. Marie and you worked in a nursing home in Sudbury, you're not going to be able to do that any longer. And you saw what the hospital did a week or so ago, where they said to their employees who work both in Sioux area hospitals and at War Memorial, you can't work in both institutions. And they had a pick. So, it's hard for us to monitor the movement of Canadians or Ontarians across the country and within the province. So we're urging and asking people to follow and respect public health advice. But if you reach out to me and say, hey, there's somebody who works in a different province and they're coming home, when they come home, they're not staying in their house, there's really nothing that the municipality can do about that. These issues are properly raised with APH, Algoma Public Health, but I don't think there's going to be a whole lot Algoma Public Health can do about it. If somebody is traveling between Sault Ste. Marie and Toronto, I don't think there's any legal restriction right now in place that would prohibit that.
Okay, I think that will help people understand why that's happening and what's going on. I think that'll be good, as we've had a number of questions about that over the last couple of weeks, and this is the first time I think we've really had a chance to ask it. So here's another question from someone who it's more of a suggestion, I guess, and maybe they're hoping that you have some pull here. But people are saying, with people at home cleaning their yards, could we maybe move up the leaf and yard waste pickup time a little sooner? This question maybe was conceived before we got all sorts of
It
snow.
came before it snowed. Yeah. I'm sure someone did it before it snowed. Yeah, it's a good question, and we've looked at that and consider it. We're challenged though with our service levels because of staffing, and we don't believe we're going to be able to move up leaf and yard waste collection based on our current service levels and staffing levels. We don't believe we're going to be able to do that. We're managing our own finances and budget too throughout this, and the reality is we're going to see a significant decrease in revenue at the municipality for a number of reasons outside of potential tax decreases, or not tax decreases, but people not paying their taxes. We have revenue loss from our facilities and from our transit. So we're looking at the revenue losses and doing what we can to make sure that we are keeping control on our costs, and we're trying to balance the need to provide essential services and maintain a reasonable cost level so that we don't have as big of a hole as we expect to have at the end of this fiscal year. But we'll be giving a council report in late April, and we'll be having some of these discussions.
Where are those? I guess those discussions at? It is sort of cost control is another question that was asked by a reader yesterday. They're seeing other parts of the province, other parts of the country where municipalities have turned to layoffs in order to cut costs.
Yeah, so we've taken a number of measures. So I had a question asked to me about some news people saw in Sudbury and some news they saw in Thunder Bay. The measures that they had taken in Sudbury and Thunder Bay, we had already taken. We just weren't as public about them. And that's out of those are internal matters, and it's also out of respect for our staff. But we had made some decisions, and the CEO and the team here had made some decisions, and we have implemented a number of methods already to try and bring our costs in line. One of the other things that I'd like people to keep in mind, though, particularly as it relates to some of our comparators, is, and we just saw this at council a few months ago. We had KPMG here, and KPMG had done an audit on our services, and what KPMG said is we're really not doing anything that we're either not statutorily required to do or that isn't expected of us. So if you take Thunder Bay, for instance, Thunder Bay has daycares. We don't have daycares, right? So they also have some 2 municipal golf courses. We don't operate a golf course. So when you're seeing some of these numbers, it's hard to compare municipality to municipality because the services municipality offers are different. So some, would be, readily available to have some staff changes because you're not going to operate your golf courses, or your daycares are simply not open. We don't have facilities like that. So we had made some decisions early on about casual staff and part-time staff, and we had implemented those decisions early on, and we're continuing to look at them. We're continuing to consider our service levels, and in consideration of those service levels, there's some things we might like to do that we won't be able to do because we have to keep the service level either where it's at, or we have to reduce service level. But those are decisions that the CEO will make in conjunction with his team. And I just want to recognize that how much great work the senior leadership team here at the municipality is doing. We have a tremendously competent team, and the CEO and his team are doing a great job. And I have a lot of confidence that they'll make good decisions that respects the taxpayer of the city of Sault Ste. Marie.
Just because people have, I guess, seen numbers from other communities, where are we at in terms of what measures have been taken in terms of staff? Do you have a sense?
Yeah, I don't have a number off the top of my head, but those will be discussions we have in open council closer to the end of the month. So we have our next council meeting is 2 weeks yesterday. So the community will get a much clearer picture of the cost of this process on us and what we're doing to deal with that cost. There'll be a full report from the CEO in front of council in 2 weeks.
Okay, thank you. I guess another question that ties right into this. There has been a suggestion a couple times it's come up in terms of economic development funding. What's the possibility that would be used to support some of these businesses? The specific reader who sent this in, I believe, is in sort of the spa industry. So this person is wondering, there's been talk of restaurants what is there's spas, gyms, hairdressers, barbers, those types of services that are not able to adapt to this in any way. Really, is there any consideration in terms of using economic development funds to support them?
Yeah, I think there's going to be, I can't speak for all council at this point because the decision hasn't been made. So I'm just speaking for myself. I think there's a good chance that we'll be supportive. I certainly intend on being supportive. Like the reality here is that the provincial government has some programs, the federal government has some programs. We're looking at assessing those, and we're also connecting with the local businesses. Tom Vare from Community Development and his team with the EDC have hosted, I think this week will be their 4th teleconference, listening to local businesses and hearing what they have to say and determining where the need is. We have to make some strategic decisions here because our resources are limited. We all know the EDF is public. Everybody knows it's a $500,000 fund. So we don't have really resources outside of the EDF that we could use to support local businesses. So we've got to develop a strategic sense of where the really significant need is and maybe where some of the gaps in the provincial and federal programs are, so that we can make sure that any resources we use to assist people are used most effectively and go to assist people that can't find assistance elsewhere. So we're piecing that together now and looking at it, trying to understand where we can use our resources best. But I fully expect City Council will likely make a decision to do as much as they can. And if that requires using the EDF, that's one of the tools at our disposal. I would be supportive of that. And that's a conversation that we're going to have at the same time we talk about what impact this is having on the municipality and our own budget. So we'll have those conversations the last meeting in April, which is 2 weeks Monday. Yeah.
Here, another person asks, what about canceling or pausing the tax increases that would happen throughout the year? Is that something that's been considered, or is that something that would come up at council later?
Well, so that our budget's passed and set, right? So our budget's based on that revenue. So we can't really go back and change that. What we could talk about is similar actions that we already took. So what we did is we suspended payment of interest or and penalties if you didn't make your payment, which is due in May. If you don't make that, there's no consequence. You don't have to pay interest, don't have to pay penalties. We can look at those kind of things. We can look at working with people to give them time to make their tax payments. So we're going to consider all the mechanisms available at our disposal, but we can't really go back and redo our budget. Like, our budget's done. Our budget is our budget. And frankly, we can't budget a deficit. I think we talked about this before, Mike. So if we went back and took out that increase, we'd be budgeting a deficit. And we can't do that statutorily. We're prohibited from doing that. Now, we can run a deficit, because that can happen in municipalities' fiscal years. It could happen that they run a deficit. And we've never run a deficit so long as I've been the mayor, but I fully expect this year it's likely that we'll run a deficit.
Okay. What about, is there anything the city can do to encourage more delivery options? One reader brings up, a number of options that are available right now. People are using, but it sounds like they're finding that there's not enough option there. Is there anything the city has been doing, or anyone the city's been working with to make that situation better?
So we are working with groups to do deliveries. You have the Sioux Search and Rescue has been supporting the community and helping get food out. We have volunteers that are helping Harvest Algoma and get food out. This is a limiting factor in a lot of communities, because if you think about it, the private sector that would support delivery services would have had a certain level of demand prior to the pandemic. That demand just shot right up, right? So, it would take the private sector a while to adjust to that. But in most communities, it hasn't fully been able to adjust to it to supply the demand. Most people are looking for home delivery services now, and a lot of businesses are doing it themselves. If you do an order through that business, they'll do curbside pickup or drop off at your home. What I would tell people is, if you have a problem and if you need something delivered and you're struggling, if you need food delivery and you're struggling, the city set up a hotline. And the city set up a hotline so people would have a central place to call, and we would be able to determine what we can do to help them. But it also helps us see patterns. right? So if we have a number of people calling over a similar issue, we as the municipality see that pattern, and then we say to ourselves, what can we do to assist and help with that? So I'm just going to say that number just so people have it. It is 705-574-1220. 705-574-1220. Whatever your challenge is, whatever your problem is, call us. And if we can't help you, we'll find someone who can help you. But the value in calling us is that we are keeping track of this. And then we're taking that data and we're trying to work with partners to fill some of the gaps we're seeing in the community. So if you have a problem, call our hotline. If you prefer to email, you can email at hotline@cityssm.on.ca. That's hotline@cityssm.on.ca. So if you have a problem, if you need a hand, if there's an issue or a concern, call us on that number, email us to that email address, and we'll do our best to assist you, find someone who can assist you. And that also gives us really good information to figure out what we can be doing better and what we can be doing to help people.
Excellent. That's a great point. So for people who are having a difficulty, that's a good option. I guess one final question I think that I have here. This is something that I think I've seen answered or spoken about on the provincial level, at least regionally. So I'll ask you to weigh in. Should people be partaking in smelt season?
Yeah. So I think the short answer to that is that's no. It's not the time to break away from our commitment to our social distancing principles. The reality is, if somebody thinks, I'm just going to go smelt fishing, it'll just be me and my friend or me and my family. If a few dozen people think like that, before you know it, you could have 30 or 40, 50 people in the same area. And I'm just going to remind everybody, there can't be a social or public gathering over 5 people. So even if you don't plan one, you can be part of one pretty quickly. If you have a few friends and you show up somewhere and there's somebody else with a few friends who's there and there's somebody else with a few friends who's there, you are all now breaking the law, and there's a consequence for that. So I think, it's 1 year. I know smelt fishing is important to a lot of people. They enjoy it. It's a fun social activity. A lot of people do it with their family and friends. But this is a different year. And just how a lot of us had to forego seeing our families at Easter and having Easter dinner with our parents and our in-laws and our siblings, I think this year a lot of us should really forego smelt fishing and pick it up again next year, and just take this year off as a year that things are different, and we need to look out for ourselves, the well-being of our family and friends, and frankly, we need to look out for each other in our community. And I want to circle back to one of the earlier points. If we are doing well, and I think we are doing pretty well, it's because we're following these rules. And now is not the time to break from them. I think we need to wait till we actually get the touchdown before we celebrate anything. And we're not there yet. We're getting there. And I want to thank the community for the tremendous effort they've made to adjust. I know there's some people that aren't complying, but my personal belief from what I've seen and people I've spoken to is there are a vast majority of people who are complying really well and who care about complying. And I want to thank them for that. And I want to reiterate the important principles here. If you have COVID-19 symptoms, you have to self-isolate. If you're traveling into Canada from out of country, you have to self-isolate. Otherwise, we want you to stay home. And if you do need to go out, practice social distancing. You should learn about all these concepts at Algoma Public Health. Their website is very informative, and we should all respect their advice and follow it. If we do that, we will be talking about the exit strategy here sooner than if we don't do it.
Can I just ask something on the heels of that? How do you have a sense of how well we're doing in terms of the police having to intervene with people gathering? Is that something you've heard, that the police have had to actively do that? Do you know of tickets that have been issued because of that?
Yeah, so I do talk to the chief about this. The chief has had, I think he's over 24 calls now, maybe a few dozen at max. He's been pleased with the number of calls. He doesn't feel like they're high or out of order. He's also been very pleased with how people have responded to they have a bit of a tiered system in response. So they're not going and immediately laying a charge. They're communicating first and explaining the law. And he said the response to that's been very positive. He feels like the community is getting the message. And I don't believe that they've laid any charges resulting from the provincial orders. But I know they're enforcing them, and I know they're active about talking to people about social and public gatherings over 5, and I know they're responding to calls. So if you see or know of people breaking that law, call Sault Ste. Marie Police Services, and the chief and the chief's team will address it. And he's been satisfied with how that's going so far, and he personally feels confident that the community is getting the message.
Okay, excellent. That's a good update. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate you coming again and or doing this online and answering these questions that people definitely have out there on their minds.
Well, thank you, Mike, and just to the community, thank you to everybody who is taking this seriously and who is respecting our public health advice. We're in this together. You see tremendous acts of kindness across our community every day. If you know somebody that needs a hand, give them a hand as safely as you can. If you have a challenge or a problem, please reach out to us. I've indicated the phone number again for everybody's reference, 705-574-1220, or hotline at cityssm.on.ca. I'm confident that if we keep doing what we're doing, we will see the end of this together and much stronger and better for it. And I just want to express my pride in how the community has responded and my appreciation as the mayor. Thank you.